Welcome back to Data-Driven Engineering. In this module, we're going to talk about tuples, and in the following one, we'll talk about lists and sets and then dictionaries. So let's first of all just talk about tuples and how they're defined. So we're going to have a value, another value, and then a third value separated by commas, and we're going to use these parentheses. Now, when we define a list in Python, we're going to use square brackets where we can have different objects or values that we put in there, and these we can change. So these we can insert another value. This one is, we don't typically change it, okay? So tuples are kind of like lists, but they're meant for cases where you create it, but you never want to change it. Okay, and then we're going to go on later to sets, and these are going to be the curly brackets, and then dictionaries, which are kind of like a type of set, but we have some key pairs. Okay, so here's maybe a value 1, and then we give it a value 1. So this might be a string that we use to reference another value, and then we have others of those. Okay, so tuple, as compared to these others, it's probably one of the simplest ones in terms of a collection of objects or values that you can define. And it really doesn't change, and you define it once, and you can carry it around. Okay, so let's get into the Jupyter notebooks here. We have a set of 7 different modules. You can get an overview of those here, where it talks about the 7 different ones. This one is going to be number 2, okay, tuples. And if you get to the lesson here, we're going to see number 2. You can go to Google Colab if you just want to run this through your web browser, or you can download it from GitHub. If you go to Google Colab, you'll just need to, when you run this, okay, it's going to ask you, it wasn't authored by Google, are you sure you want to run it? Go ahead and select Run Anyway. Okay, and then you can run all of these exercises just through your web browser, or you can download it and open it up with Jupyter Notebook like I've done here. All right, let's go through this. Okay, so Python tuples, it's again one of the 4 types that can store multiple items or objects as a single variable. It's a finite set of values, and it's designed to be static, so not changing. Like a constant that you define once and doesn't change. Okay, so let's go ahead and define one here and just see the result. Okay, we're going to do y, then we use these parentheses, and I'll just do 1, 2.7, and 3.8 times 10 to the third, and then there's 4.9. So I have these 4 values. All right, now let's go ahead and print this out. Okay, when I print y and print the type of y, I'm going to see 2 different things here. I'm going to see the tuple that is printed out just like I entered it in here. But then you can also see here the type of y is, this is a class, it's a type of object that is a tuple. So you can think of it kind of like as a multiple, okay, if you want to think of, if the word tuple really doesn't make sense. But all right, so let's go ahead and unpack this. So we showed how to create it. Now we want to separate out individual elements. I can do for yi in y and iterate through, and just go ahead and print yi. All right, so I can print each one. It's going to go through this loop one at a time and print those values. You'll notice how this stays in order. Sets, later on, there's no particular order to a set. Okay, but a tuple or a list, the order is preserved. Now, another way to unpack the tuple is by assigning a new variable for each element. Okay, so I could say I want to have y0, 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to say that equals y. All right, and let me go ahead and print those 4 values. And there I can see I've split them apart, so now that equals 1. This is 2.7, 3,800, 4.9. All right, let's get a tuple length. This is the number of objects that we have. Okay, so this is length of y, and that should be equal to 4. Now, we also have an index. on this. And so each of the references, we can reference them after we create it. We can reference it by saying, I want the very first element. So y0 is going to be my very first element, and that's going to be equal to 1. But if I change that to 2, for example, that's the third element, and that's 3,800. All right, so let me just go ahead and print that again just so we can see it. All right, so there's our 0, 1, 2, and 3. All right, now the last element, if we want to access the very last one, we can do y3, or we can do y minus 1. Now, if we do y minus 1, it says basically here's 0, and I'm just going to go minus 1. There's nothing there, so it goes back to the end. And if I do minus 2, then it's going to do the second to last. Now, we can also iterate with a range. All right, so this is for I in range 3. So I'm going to go through 0, 1, 2, 3. And then I can print I and then yi. So it's a little bit confusing because normally lists are defined with the square brackets. But again, you can reference elements of a tuple or a list with these square brackets. All right, so there's 0, 1, 2. And if I put 4 here, it'll show me all 4 of them. All right, let's go ahead and just iterate through, but print every other element. This is a little bit of a review on the for statements and looping through. So if I go 0 to length of y, that's going to cover all of them. And then I'm going to say take steps of 2, though. So only every other one. So let's go ahead and print this. And you'll see that it just gets the very first one and the third one. So in steps of 2 there. All right, let's go ahead and take a slice of this. So let's say we only want a part of the tuple, a subset. I can say I'm going to go from 1, I'll start there, and then to 3. It doesn't include this last one. So that's just going to be element 1 and 2 of that tuple. Let's go ahead and leave out the final number. Okay, if you just put 1 and then the colon, it just assumes that you're going to the end. Okay, so it's like a shortened way. If you just leave it out, it'll go all the way to the end. Okay, if you put in -1, again, you're still going to be missing that last element there. Okay, so just go ahead and leave that out to get the very last element. All right, so we can leave out the first number, and it directs it to start at the very beginning. So let's go y colon 3, and so I'm going to start all the way at the beginning, and that would be shortened for something like 0, 3. Okay, it would give me the same result. Now we can also get the index of a value. Now if there's multiple of that value, then it's just going to be the first occurrence that is returned. So let's get the index of 2.7. You can see here should be equal to 1. All right, and if I put in 1, you see that's 0, but let's say I put in 1.1. It says it's not in the tuple. All right, so let's go and count the number of values. Let's count how many 3,800s there are in our set, and there's 1 of those. All right, so how about 380? There are none of those. All right, we can get the maximum, minimum, and summation as well. So let's go ahead and print the max, the min, and the sum. All right, so there's the maximum, 3,800. The min is 1, and the summation of all the values in there is 3808.6. All right, now we can also use the dir to list all the attributes of a tuple. So I'm going to insert a cell below. We've only used 1, which is the value of y. Okay, but I can do dir and see all the properties and also the methods. Okay, so I just have count and index as methods there. And then I have these other hidden ones that are there with the double underscore prepending and postpending on that. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the exercise 2a. We're going to create a tuple W with a single value 2.7. So if I just create a floating point number, I'd go 2.7. All right, so if we wanted to create just a single value, if I go like this, I'm still not going to get the right response from this. Okay, it's still going to be just a floating point number when I say parentheses 2.7, because that's, if I have something like this, that's still going to be a float. So the way we distinguish that is we have to put a comma here with a blank after it. And now you can see that it's going to be a tuple type. So it's a little bit confusing here, but if you want to create a tuple, and you want this to be a tuple with a single value, then you need to put the comma there. Now the reason for that is some functions, they require you to input a tuple instead of a single value. And so if you ever need that, just put a single value into a tuple just to include the comma there. All right, let's go ahead and create a new tuple with values from rolling a 6-sided die 10 times. All right, let's go ahead and create that. I'll just call that D equals this. All right, and then we want to count the number of, each the number of times each value appears. So you could say count 1 like that, and maybe and then copy it again. Okay, count 2, and so on, and you could print out how often it is, it appears. But let's go ahead and do just a for loop. Okay, for I in range, and then we'd start from 1 and then go to 7 because it doesn't include the very last one. And then I'll print I and then decount I. All right, so there's our answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see that 2 was counted most frequently. All right, so there we have it, this die. All right, maybe I can even do a variable. Okay, it doesn't let us define that here, but you can do Greek letters, for example. Maybe a future version of Python will let you define emojis as variables. For right now, it's not allowed. All right, so there we have it. Python, okay, with our tuple. All right, and next module that we're going to go to is going to be on lists. And if you'd like to also just follow along, you can come here to, here's tuple. I'll post this video here, and each one will have a video with solutions on each of those.